I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander. And today we'd like to talk to you about ways of finding courage. In today's world, with all of the challenges that we have, with the changes that come into all of our lives, we really do want to have a courageous life, and we need to be able to find the courage to deal with the challenges, circumstances that come into our lives. Courage is really something that gives us the oomph to carry on, doesn't it, Iris?
Yes, it is. And sometimes we're hard pressed to find courage. But if we forget ourselves, the little self, and remember that we are a larger person and are part of God the whole, then we're more able to find the courage that we're seeking. It's when we're selfish in our thoughts that we lack the ability to find courage. Don't you think so?
I think so, yes, when we're selfish and also when we're afraid.
Yeah.
And I think so many are afraid of just a lot of things. We're afraid that we're going to lose our jobs. We're afraid there's not going to be enough money. We're afraid of a lot of things. And I think one of the magnificent messages of Christianity, of New Thought truth, and of all spiritual traditions is really that message of not being afraid. There's no real need to be afraid. We should have courage to deal with the circumstances and situations, but we really begin to get beat down. And I think we begin to get beaten down, I should say properly. We begin to get beaten down in our early years. And I'm reminded of the story that I tell so often when I speak about seeing a little child that was just a toddler with a T-shirt, and on the T-shirt it said, "My name is No No," because of course what was said to him more than anything is no no. And most of us are faced with that as children. We do it to our children, and beyond telling our children no to things that they ought not to do, and some to preserve them and protect them, but sometimes we say it for our own convenience. And then as children are growing up, we begin to build within their consciousness a lot of negativity in terms of limitations of what they can and what they can't do. And we tell children with one voice that you can be president of the United States and your potential is limitless. And then on the other side, when we have a child who says they want to do this or that, we tell them why they can't. And then for most of us, as we grow up through adolescence into young adulthood, we again are faced with the appearance of the fact that there are some things that we just can't do. And so our courage just gets pushed down so that we're not very brave.
Yes, and we've been told if we go out with our hair wet or our clothing wet or so forth, we're going to get a bad cold. But now the scientists have proven that a virus causes a cold. So all those fears we had instilled in us of wet feet and so forth were just that, just not valid. But we go through life, don't we, thinking certain things are true, letting them make us be fearful, and then it comes out that that's not the case at all. Very recently, as you know, my son and his wife lived with me temporarily, and they were scheduled to move out of my home. And I thought I was afraid I was going to be lonely. So I signed up for a service club that I belonged to work 4 days, the week and a half following the time they were scheduled to move from my home. Well, then I had unexpectedly out-of-town guests. And so I still had to fulfill my obligations because it's too hard to find someone to replace you in those service clubs. So here I was afraid, and my fear was justified because I had all these things happening at one time. But if I hadn't been so afraid of being lonely, then if I had just let nature take its course and done the normal amount of things, then everything would have worked out all right. But isn't it true that it's when we're afraid that something's going to happen, it does only worse?
Absolutely. And our fears, come upon us, and that which I feared is, and so we have to be careful of that. And a good part of that has to do with exactly what we teach in New Thought, and that is that thoughts create things,
Yes.
that nothing exists that doesn't come out of mind. And so as we are thinking, as our thought process moves forward, we are creating the environment in which we live. We used to teach in the church, remember that little saying we used to have so often, words and thoughts have molding power, so let us careful be, knowing that we're building our eternity. That every word and every thought creates something. And if we set up that thought and that word of fear or lack of self-confidence or defeating ourselves in terms of our self-esteem. Those things all rob us of courage. Isn't self-esteem is one, I think,
Yeah.
that just robs us of courage.
Yeah.
And we know from sociologists and psychologists that one of the greatest difficulties of the Western mind and life is a lack of self-esteem, which is utterly and completely ridiculous because
Ridiculous.
we're in the best possible situation in the world, and yet we have such a low image of ourselves, and that speaks to how our minds are operating really, and what's going on within us. Isn't that true?
Yes, it is true, and very often we allow other people's opinion to impact on our on how we treat ourselves. But very often we don't know what the other people are thinking. I remember when I was in my late teens and I was traveling on a bus, and there was a lady staring at me, and I thought something was wrong. So I was fixing my hair and trying to make myself look smoothed out. And I said to her, "Is something wrong?" Because she kept staring at me, and she said, "Oh, my dear, no, nothing is wrong." And then she complimented me very highly. And she said, "And I'll never forget the way you look." And I thought, that was the biggest lesson I've ever had. And that was in my mid to late teens. And after that, when people looked at me, I just assumed, well, they're admiring me, and half the time they probably were not. But isn't it true that early on we get a thought pattern and we get in that groove and we stay in that groove forever?
Absolutely. And I think that speaks to why so many, one of the major fears that people have, we understand or read, is speaking in front of a group, because we're afraid to expose ourselves to
Yes,
others and to the scrutiny of others.
yes.
And I'm just thinking of a great teacher in the New Thought movement, Terry Cole Whitaker, and I believe what was her first book? What you think of me is none of my
None of my
business.
business.
And tremendous. And I don't remember the context of the book, but I remember the title. But that title speaks to exactly what we're talking about, and that is people have opinions about us and think about us all the time. And so we think often that they're thinking something negative. In your case, you thought the woman was being critical when in fact she was being complimentary.
Yeah.
But in our case, what we need is to have within ourselves the vitality and the self-confidence. And the self-confidence comes from simply the fact of who we are, and we're perfect children of God. And that's true not only for ourselves, but it's true for everyone. And I think that gives us and should give us great courage.
Yes, and if another person is being critical, so what? It's just that one other person's opinion. And they might change their minds. And I've given myself lectures like that in the past because we change our minds from day to day, from moment to moment sometimes. So other people do too. So they're being critical, so what?
Very often when I'm speaking, I'll tell people that I have a great license up here because you're all watching me and I can say whatever I want. And I think that it's important for us to have that feeling within ourselves that we are worthwhile and that we do have something positive and affirmative to share in the life experience. And therefore, if people are judgmental of us or people are looking at us and thinking what they think, that has to do with them. That's their problem. That's not our problem. But when we allow them to influence us, then they begin to take control of our thinking and of our mind process, and they rob us of the courage and the self-sufficiency and the view of ourselves that we need to have and that we need to cultivate and maintain.
But only as much as we allow them to, because they can't do that unless we allow them to. So if we have a high self-esteem, or if we're just sensible and know that we have inner help, all we need, and that someone's opinion is not necessarily important, and that opinion may change very quickly, then if we can just live with those thoughts in our hearts and in our minds and guiding us, then we'll be far more peaceful, happy, strong, and confident. And then when real trouble hits us, we're able then to assess what's the problem and go on from there. Where if we've just gone through life being battered by others, then allowing ourselves to be battered, then when a real problem strikes, we don't have the reserve.
And isn't that what, just as I was just thinking, as you made mention of the fact of being confident? Confident living is the whole purpose of this program.
Yes.
And it's the whole thrust behind New Thought metaphysical philosophy, and that is to make us confident in the process of living. And we need to be confident. And in order to be confident of ourselves and of the world and the environment that we have, we then are courageous. It just comes to pass that we're courageous if we have a level of confidence.
Yes, and I know I've looked at people who've had serious problems in their lives and thinking, how can they be so confident? How can they be so courageous? But actually, we all have to live a life of courage, don't we?
We do. And interestingly, what I find in my personal life is that what people perceive as being courageous really has to do with letting the circumstances and situations of life take care of themselves.
Hmm.
And that is that nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to happen to me or to those around me or to the world or to anyone else that we can't deal with, and that there isn't some positive and wonderful good in the midst of. And that's true of every circumstance. And when that happens, when that level of confidence comes into our lives, we don't have to strive to be confident or strive to be courageous. The courage becomes a part of our fiber, but interestingly, it's a part of all of us. It's just claimed by some of us. And what we need to do is to show people, and we show them in the best way by example, as you've said so many times, and we say that there's no way that we can lecture people into understanding. Understanding comes from within. So by witnessing others who are demonstrators of these principles, that's how we actually make converts, if you will, to the thinking and the teaching. And we're not talking about converts to our religion, we're talking about converts to this way of thinking and to this positive and affirmative life. And from my perspective, I've always thought, and because of the fact that Hattie Garlish, who was the foundress of our organization, always taught us that if you don't live it, then you're not going to ever be able to share it with other people. That you may be able to write it, you may be able to talk about it, you may be able to lecture, you may be able to do all kinds of things. But if you can demonstrate it, then people are going to point to that and say, that really works. And after all, isn't that what Christ Jesus talked about in Christianity? And
Yeah.
that is that we would know Christians by the demonstration of their life, not by what they say or what they teach necessarily. And that's the aspect of Christianity, but it's true of all faith traditions that those who live the teaching are the ones that are able to share it with others much more abundantly.
Yes, and as we demonstrate that in our own lives, then we're being courageous and we're also being a good example, and then people can look to us. But at the same time, then we look to others. So it's a round robin, isn't it? It's nothing, no man is an island. We gain from each other over and over, over and over. And if we can always remember that others are looking to us, I think it gives us added courage to be strong.
And that courage does come from our interdependence on each other. And so often in life, I think we think of the fact that we have to be strong, and that in order to be strong, we have to be able to stand alone. And certainly there are times when we have to stand alone. But for most of us, during most of our lives, we are interdependent upon other people. And
Yeah.
that's a wonderful thing. And it's
And
something we need to reach out to.
we do, and we need to express our gratitude I know just recently I told a friend how inspiring she is to me, and I really meant it with all my heart. But she didn't know that she was inspiring at all because she just thought we were friends. But I think expressing gratitude is one of the best things we can do for ourselves and for others, don't you?
Absolutely. Expressing gratitude creates a most positive environment within our consciousness for good and wonderful things to happen. It also is a way for us to eliminate negativity because gratitude just kind of overshadows negativity.
Yeah. And as you said earlier, that Paul said that which I feared, Job, that which I feared has come upon me. That's one of the things we need to guard against most of all, is to not be fearful of the unknown, to not be fearful of that which might happen, because that which might happen might turn to good before it happens.
We have no way of knowing what good and wonderful thing is going to come into our lives. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you the opportunity to receive some literature that will allow you to continue the thoughts and teachings that we're sharing with you today.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through confident living.
Before the break, we were talking about that which I have feared has come upon me. And so often our fears do become manifest in our lives. And I'm thinking of physical ailments. And so often when people are fearful of a certain disease, they will in fact end up with that disease. But we know too that when we lack courage and when we live lives of stress and strain, and when we allow negativity to come into our lives, especially at the level of our mind, and to indwell our spirit as well and our physical bodies, then we get sick, don't we?
Yes, we do. And doctors have proven, Dr. Carl Simonton, lots of doctors, Dr. Caroline Mace, that the thought really heals. And if we think we're going to be healed, we will be healed. And Caroline Mace gives an example of a young boy who was 9 years old who had a brain tumor. And he worked he says, I need help, God. And he truly worked at healing himself and healed himself.
Mhm.
And he went through a lot of different stages, but he was healed. And Dr. Simonton taught that too. And it's just exactly what you just said. They're teaching people to think positively and to see the illness as a game of healing, that they're doing what they can to heal. And there are, most of us, and I'm sure you do, visualization. I know I do. And when we do the visualization, that's what they're doing. It's the same thing. We're keeping our bodies healthy and strong or healing from some disease that we've had because we need to think in a positive way and visualize it. And that which we see is what will manifest.
Yeah. That issue of courage then also is one that keeps us healthy by
Yeah.
having courage. We stay healthy, and through having courage, we can also become healthy because we can manifest healing, or we can also have courage to manifest a positive consciousness or state of being or state of mind in the midst of our illness. And I'm thinking now of a good friend of ours whom we know that was in the fellowship for a long time who passed into spirit with cancer and went through that experience in such a courageous way. And I can think of others, as you can too, whom we've known who have had life-threatening and challenging diseases, and in some cases have passed into spirit with those diseases, but who have gone through them with such courageousness. And those people were so much more empowered in the experience than those who lacked the courage and were defeated.
Yes. And many people who go through travail will then use that travail as an anchor to get people to do what they want. And then that's very self-defeating because those people are very unhappy. And I'm thinking of a lady yesterday. I had someone said to me, so-and-so is really, do you believe in evil? So-and-so really seems to be evil. So we discussed evil. And then, which as you teach so beautifully, is error of thought. And the lady we were discussing had had a daughter who died when the daughter was in her mid-teens, and she died suddenly in an accident. And everyone feels sorry for this lady because she had the daughter die. So my friend with whom I was discussing that yesterday said, well, you had a daughter die. And I said, that's right, I did. But, and so I was trying to make excuses for the other friend. And she says, don't make excuses for her. We react to circumstances in our lives according to our own inner strength of character. And I just think that lady lacks strength of character. And those of you who had children die and then kept on, keeping on, then they have strength of character. And you know something, I think that's somewhat true. A lot of people will use the adversity in their life not as a stepping stone, but it's something to pull everyone down to a lower level, the people around them, and they'll use it as an excuse.
Absolutely. They'll use it as an excuse or a justification
Yeah.
for staying where they are. And all of us are faced with different levels. Of course, losing a child is an extreme nature, but we're faced with difficulties and challenges. And if we allow those difficulties and challenges to weigh us down and as an excuse for not getting on with our lives and dealing with the circumstance and situation, then we're not courageous at all. We're rather cowardly. And I'm thinking now of the story that I have told you, shared with you before many times, of the lady that had a divorce who had come for some counseling, and we had talked, and during the third session, she said something to me that made me think that this was a little older experience than I had thought. I thought that it was rather immediate, and this was a counseling session that took place in the 80s. And I said, when were you divorced? When did you separate and divorce from your husband? She said, in 1967. And of course, this was in the mid-1980s, but she was relating it to me as a fresh experience, and she had stayed in the midst of it. Well, there's an example of an individual who didn't have the courage and didn't have the means to cultivate the courage to deal with that circumstance and situation. And her pain was real, and we certainly feel compassion for her. But the fact is that she had robbed herself of many years of good life, and that she had overlooked the opportunity to become a courageous overcomer through the experience of this horrible experience of divorce and separation, which is awful. But it's something like other experiences that we need to deal with, and we need to gain strength from our experiencing them. And as we do that, then we become more courageous, we become stronger, more victorious people who are able to deal in a positive and affirmative way with every circumstance when it comes into our life.
And we can also look to other people and see that others have endured this pain or agony or whatever the circumstances are, because whatever we face, others have faced. I remember when my first child was born, and I thought I couldn't bear the pain. And I realized that every person on earth, and there's billions, have come through in this very same way. Some woman has borne the pain. And you know something? That really helped me. just thinking that on my own. And I'm sure my guardian angel or someone on the inner planes put the idea in my head. But it's just exactly what I needed, because if others could have borne that pain over and over and over, certainly, why shouldn't I?
And that was a great source of courage for you.
Exactly. So that we can use that as an example all through life, that whatever we're facing, others have faced. And I read once that a hangnail on our own finger causes us greater agony than 20 people dying in a foreign country whom we don't know. And so it doesn't, whatever we're facing that's adverse in our lives, then if it's painful to us, it's painful to us. So regardless of what it is, if it's painful, then we need to use the same techniques that others have used, because that's a big thing in our life at that moment.
And the big issue, I think, with pain or with loss is to go through the grieving, be in the midst of it ever so briefly if we can, and then look to the experience and what it is that we should gain from it and where we should go from there. And I think that's key. We have to, in the midst of every challenging circumstance and every difficulty and every loss, we have to be able to reach a point in time of going through our period of grieving, going through the acknowledgement of where we are, going through the loss, and then looking and opening ourselves courageously to the guidance and the direction of what is to take place next in our lives, and then to move on.
Yes, and that same rule could apply for everything in our life that we regret having happened, but we know that, well, this is a natural course of events. And so if we do what you just said, then we can face everything, whether it's large or small. And that's what gives us peace of mind and gives us confidence to face life courageously, victoriously, is when we accept ourselves and our own inadequacies as being not a terrible thing, but a normal thing, and that we can survive this and grow through it and gain from it.
And in the last few minutes that we have, I think we should touch upon the fact that we also believe that we gain courage by claiming who and what we are.
Yes.
And that's our connectiveness to the Creator and to the divine, whatever that is that we claim it to be. And the power and the reality of God in life and in the universe should bring us great courage.
Yes, and if we don't, then we need to really give some strong self-examination to see why it doesn't, and then work through that. Because we can all work through everything that's adverse in our life, whether it's our own way of thinking, and very often that's what it is. Regardless, then we can work through that, and we don't just wallow in it, but work through it and go through to the other side. Someone expressed that problems are should be just a bridge to get us across the water. And then we have to get off on the other side. So we have to get off our pain and grief and regret and whatever the negativity is in our life. We have to put it behind us and move on with courage.
And as we do that, one of the things that we teach in New Thought is that we connect our mind with divine mind. And if we keep our mind connected with divine mind, then we are always attuned to the guidance and the infinite intelligence that comes to us from the Creator.
Isn't it just wonderful to know that we always have that divine source available, and it's always there, day and night, all the time.
And that there's nothing that we can do to stop it. We can stop the flow of it, we can stop claiming it, but that power and that presence is always there. And we talk so often about the fact that God is changeless reality and changeless good. So it isn't that God is deciding from time to time whether we're meeting the expectations of that are set for us or not. But in fact, that reality of God's presence is accessible and available to us always. But in order for us to claim it, we need to, number one, claim it, and then number two, be guided and directed to do something.
Yes, and know our own position, who and what we are. There was a teacher who had the children write the good things they saw about each other, and then each in the classroom, and then she compiled them into lists and gave those lists to each child. Like everyone wrote their opinion of you, and then she compiled them and me, and she compiled them and gave us our list and the others their list. And then when one child died in Vietnam, and she went to his memorial service, then all the other children who were present, well, they're no longer children, they were young adults, said they still had their list. And the father of that young boy who had died in Vietnam told her what a wonderful thing she had done, because he still had that list in his wallet when he died, and he looked at it when he was feeling lacking courage. I mean, I'm sure that's when he looked at it. And so then they were undergirded by the opinion people expressed in a positive way about them.
It's wonderful and magnificent that people around us can give us courage, that the presence and power of God can give us courage, and that we can live courageous and empowered lives. We hope that you found the information that we shared with you useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.